Yeah, well, I think this version of Renegades is better than the old one, the one that's going out now anyway. I think if you were to put Renegades up against 100 Thieves, I think Renegades would win without them having Cassard behind them.
Mm.
And I think that's really saying something. I think at the moment, this Renegades team is in Elo hell. And, they would obviously flourish in the opportunity of playing in the North American League, just like Furia has. They could do with a lineup upgrade, to be honest. That's my opinion. The Renegades guys aren't infallible.
Hello everyone, welcome to Geographically Challenged episode number 20. It's a very special episode, not only because we've managed to get to episode number 20, but also because we have two very official men on our broadcast today. It's great to have you both back again. Bleh, the one and only official Bleh. Obviously, you have to have official in your name, otherwise we won't know who you are. And of course, we have official SnypeR here as well. So welcoming Ian to the desk. Obviously, Pilski's here with us as always. But Ian, it's been a little while since we caught up. As I can see, you've grown a wonderful beard in that meanwhile. So I guess that is like a nice analogy for how long it has been since we actually had a broadcast together, because you've managed to grow a Corona beard in that meanwhile.
Yeah, so April 4th was the last broadcast we did together, and that's how long this beard has been going. It's had a few trims here and there. It's looked a lot worse than this, but yeah, well, those playing at home might think I was here just for looks, but that couldn't be further from the truth, could it?
Yeah, no, definitely not. I mean, that's definitely not the reason we got you in here for, because we already have three beauty experts on the show already, so we don't need another one. Anyway,
well, with our powers combined, I think we'd be pretty all right, actually.
Maybe. We'll see how this episode goes. By the way, I think we've actually got a really nice spread of just like people, if that makes sense, right? Because you've got me and Pilski. I feel like we're generally fairly optimistic when it comes to a lot of the topics that we tend to talk about. And then Bleh, he's like the guy that just shits on everything. And now we also have Ian. We have SnypeR here. So I kind of feel like you fall into the Bleh camp a little bit more, SnypeR.
It's a more fun camp. It's a more fun camp. Let's be real.
So we got a nice 2-2 split this time. Oh, I also want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, which is actually no one. Unfortunately, we don't have a sponsor. But if we did, this is where we give a shout out to a sponsor. So if you like money, feel free to give us some money, and we'll be able to, shout your sponsor out or whatever.
Or if you don't like money, feel free to give us some money.
That's true. That's right. Exactly. Look, let's get into all of the news and what's been going on, because things have been a fairly interesting week thus far. And first one that we want to talk about, of course, is the ESIC news, the stuff that sort of came out probably a week ago now, I'd say. And for those that haven't heard or maybe needed a little bit of a refresher, 7 Australian players were banned by ESIC for betting on MDL games for 12 months. Now, those players were STVN, ADK, Maker, Netic, JD, Rackham, and JHD. Now, just to give some context before we get into the discussion here, I want to sort of clarify a few points around this. I think a lot of people instantly thought this was a match-fixing thing, which it isn't, at least as far as has been released so far. Although, as far as I understand, there is still an investigation going on regarding match-fixing, although it's not necessarily to do with the players that are listed in that 7. Apparently, ESIC's referred this matter to law enforcement as well, so I don't really know what that means, but that's probably a good discussion that we can get into as well. And the other thing is that they had associates betting on these matches as well, so it wasn't just those 7 players. And if I'm being honest here, guys, I've got to say I'd be pretty surprised if it's only those 7 that are betting on Australian MDL games as a player. So maybe we'll give this one to Ian first. You're obviously the guest on the podcast, so let's get some fiery opinions straight out of here. What are your initial thoughts on this whole thing? I mean, was it a surprise to you to see these guys getting banned, or just anyone in general, I suppose?
Yeah, look, I mean, there is that surprise that you're just surprised that someone's watching, because for a long time we've always seen scrupulous matches and thought, gee, that's a bit sus and nothing's ever come about. And then you think, well, gee, now everyone's just going to do it. And then for out of nowhere, there was this article published in the news about these players, and it was all over TV, these players who had been rated for match fixing in esports, and that was pretty exciting. But the real thing is very serious and needs to be taken care of, right? So in China, they don't seem to give a crap about match fixing. There's no laws. But in Australia, there's the Gambling Act, and it's fraudulent activity as far as the law is concerned. So that's where they come into it. And for the players that are involved, look, yeah, I am a little surprised at some of them, but obviously for some of the others, not too surprised.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, Bleh, this must be a good thing for you now, right? Because everyone always used to look at India and say, that's the region that has the cheetah coming from it, right? Now at least we've got a bit of shit to throw at the Australian region as well.
It's nice. You got some of the Chinese teams trying to throw, two teams trying to throw the same game at the same time. You got Australia down there. You got a bunch of people match fixing and betting. And of course, we have a couple of famous cheaters, where I'm from. So yeah, it all makes sense. Everything's kind of equal. Everything kind of balances out. We're all challenged in a weird way.
In a little bit of a way. Okay, Pilsky. I mean, this for me was, I guess, not really a huge surprise, especially given we heard that whole thing around the potential match fixing, whatever that was earlier on in the year, which this isn't necessarily related to. But just when you hear about that all sort of every now and then, these kinds of rumors popping out, you eventually sort of think, okay, something has to break, something has to crack, and this was kind of it seems like.
Yeah, I guess so. I wasn't really surprised by it. Like the match fixing is one thing. Like I've never really seen any hard or solid evidence on Asia or Oceanic Counter-Strike that like matches have been fixed. But you always see like the fishy results. You always, me and you have casted plenty of matches, Jordan, where one team's up like 1-5 odds and then they lose their map pick 16-6 or something like that when they're meant to 2-0 the series. Like you see stuff like that all the time, which makes you sort of have a bit of a question mark moment. In terms of this like specific topic and this specific ruling, I'm not surprised by it at all, because even going back to when I was an active player, which was like ages ago, and I wasn't a particularly good one, playing in like, low level MDL or something like that. Even I knew of people who were betting on MDL while playing, or betting on, some of their own games and things like that. Not necessarily throwing matches, but I know 100% of more than 3 people, none of which who are listed here, who were doing that and making good dough off of it based on insider knowledge that they had, or knowing scrim results, or having scrimmed against teams that they are actually betting on.
What about you, Ian? Did this ever go back as far as when you were playing as well?
Yeah, I mean, people were betting on matches even while I was in immunity, and it wasn't looked at as anything bad if it was other matches. But everyone knew your own matches were out of limits, right? Off limits. So, there was a lot of people making a lot of money on esports back in the day in 2015. The bookies had only just come in. They weren't very, on the money, so to speak. And so, it was taken advantage of by a lot of players. But I think as long as you're not playing in that league, I think it's okay. As soon as you have some sort of invested interest in that league. I mean, obviously we all have insider knowledge. And I think, maybe we shouldn't be betting on any sort of games while we're playing actively. And I think that goes for any sport, whether it be cricket, whether it be AFL, whatever. You just don't do it. I think one thing that did stick with me from the Rooster diatribe that they put out was that no one ever saw ESIC coming and saying, hey, this is the rules. ESL has obviously said things like, oh, you don't bet on games while you're in this league. And that's fine. MDL, I'm not sure on the rules. I haven't been to that website in forever. But you just don't bet on anything that you're playing in. Simple as that. And I think it needs to be, these guys, it's unlucky for them that they're going to get making an example of, but someone has to take the fall here. And I think if everyone in Counter-Strike just stopped betting on Counter-Strike matches that they are involved in, if they're in that league, then I think it would be a better place.
I mean, is it even fair to say that as an excuse that, ESIC didn't tell us this, or it might not have been in the ESEA rules when Valve did make that announcement like a year and a half or 2 years ago?
Yes.
You shouldn't be betting on it if you're a player or a caster or involved. Like, even if you're like, I'd say like a production, let's say you're pushing the buttons in the production room in ESL. Even
watch
then,
every single match, you've got some sort of inside knowledge.
Yeah, you know that there's probably a team that's breaking up after this event, even though that hasn't been announced publicly, et cetera, et cetera. There isn't really that much of an excuse, in my opinion, in that respect. And I guess, like, looking at it from a player's position, I think you can be quite naive there. Like, you can look at that and be like, oh, I'm just betting on myself to win this game. Like, what's wrong with that? But ethically speaking, from that kind of a standpoint, that's where there's sort of like a bit more of a grey area. And it's kind of better to just avoid it, I guess.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, just thinking betting on yourself is okay, because you're betting on yourself to win every game. It's morally corrupt anyway. So you just shouldn't do that. Ethically, it's wrong. And as we've said, I think it's pretty clear. Like if you're a player, if you are a professional player and you're signed to a team, you shouldn't be betting on your leagues or any Counter-Strike. As simple as that. Your income should be from playing and not from anything else.
Yeah, definitely. What does this mean for Rooster, though? I mean, that's another big question, right? Because they've lost 2 players. I think, we look at Nedic as probably one of the up-and-coming players as well, at least someone that we've talked about quite a lot on this podcast, Pilski. So to lose ADK and Nedic, I think is a reasonable blow to the roster. And based on my discussion with ASAP, I don't know if you guys watched that as well. You can. That's around this topic as well. He sort of said that he at least wanted to continue playing with the team, and it seems like the core 3 of the remaining players will want to stay together. But I mean, what does that mean for them now? Because theoretically, they were like a top 4, top 5 team. You lose 2 of your players. I mean, that's a big deal, right?
I'm kind of hoping that it helps some of the players like move on from Rooster, to be honest. Like, I'm a fan of the players in Rooster. I'm not necessarily a fan of like Rooster, the team, to be honest. I like them as prospects and I like them as like talented players. But I'm not sure. I think I would much rather see some of those players go to some other teams and actually like spread out a little bit more in terms of just spreading the talent around. But if they're going to make another, iteration of a Rooster roster, maybe combine like Rooster 1 and 2 or something like that, they'll probably still be a team of around the same level, I would imagine. But I'd just like to see ASAP on a better team or something like that. As for Chelios, I mean, I'm sure he's had his opportunities before, but hasn't taken them for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, that was even indicated to me in that discussion with ASAP that they had received offers even from international regions. Like maybe not all of the players, but at least some degree of international interest around that Rooster roster, which I guess is kind of surprising on one hand, but also not too surprising on the other hand. Either way, nothing came of it, and now very likely nothing will come from it.
Yeah, I find that hard to believe that there's international offers for anyone in the Rooster lineup, particularly when we have other stars in Australian Counter-Strike that are just hung out to dry, so to speak, or stuck in contracts with other orgs and not making any moves to get out of them. So, yeah. I'd take that with a grain of salt.
But the weird thing is for me, like that's not the first instance that I've heard of that rumor, So like it must be coming from somewhere, surely. Anyways, I guess it's a bit of an aside when it comes to this whole ESIC thing. The other question around that is it a fair ban? Like, is 12 months fair for what they did? Should it be longer? Should it be shorter? What's the opinions across the board?
I think 12's fair. Initially, I thought it was just going to be, I thought it was a slap on the wrist, considering I was under the impression it was for match fixing, right? So in that case, 1 year is definitely not enough. But considering it's them betting on their games, again, not justifying it, it's dumb as shit. Like you guys have said already, if you're involved in playing or in any way whatsoever, you should be betting, period, in any Counter-Strike tournament. Doesn't matter if it's a South American league happening, which no one knows about. Doesn't really matter. You should be betting. But if it's for that and it's kind of like setting a precedent for things, I think a year is fine. I think it's fair. As long as they're not caught match fixing. If there is any match fixing involved, minimum of 3 years in my opinion. But if just for the betting, 1 year is okay, I guess.
Yeah, I think with regard to the match fixing thing and this whole, like, if there was match fixing involved, based on the article, it seems like, okay, this is the punishment for the betting, the 12 months, and obviously anything else can be added on top of that relating to the match fixing as well.
With match fixing, it's very hard to prove, right? So you can't, unless you have transactions that say we will throw this game, or hey guys, let's make sure we don't win this game, or let's make sure we, even let them get more than 11 rounds, because often you have betting websites that have a line and all that matters is that the game is close for those bettors. So that's the kind of match fixing I think that they'd be looking for. And, I've called it out on Twitter a couple of times when I've seen particularly Chinese teams throw rounds and get score lines close. Like every game is 16-11 or 16-12 because it doesn't hurt the team that's winning to lose those rounds, right? So that's why they have to be very careful what they say. We're talking about a matter of law, and so there needs to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt that the match fixing was there. Yeah. Banning them for a year for just gambling on these games, I think it's acceptable. A year is a long time in esports, particularly a game like Counter-Strike, which is a bit turbulent at the moment. Maybe even 2 years would really hit home hard. And if it's match fixing, then it's quite hard to put a number on that. We've seen what's happened before with iBuyPower. So forever is a long time, and I don't know, 2 years probably isn't enough.
I mean, a year.
One thing I just want to say as well is like Blair was saying, you're an idiot if you bet on any Counter-Strike match while you're playing. I think that needs to expand even further beyond that. I think if you're a player of any esport and you're a part of any esports organization, I think you shouldn't be able to bet on games just because, like Jordan said, if you're in the production room, you already know what teams are going to die. If you're working for Chiefs, you already know what's happening behind the scenes. If you're in the League of Legends team, you know what's happening with the Counter-Strike team and, vis-a-vis. So I think, any esports player shouldn't be betting on any esports game.
I don't think that's an unreasonable stance to take, but the devil's advocate to that would be, well, if you were to look at, traditional sports, like let's say a cricket player betting on golf, it's like, it's a bit different, right? Because esports is like one ecosystem almost, whereas traditional sports are separate ecosystems, but it's the same kind of thing in that one game is a game and then the other game is the other game. Like it's two separate entities in a way.
It's the same sport as far as I'm concerned, right? So you've got esports that covers every single game. You can work for Chiefs and be in the League of Legends team. And I'm just using Chiefs as an example. They've obviously done nothing wrong. You can be in the League of Legends team. You can be in the Counter-Strike team. You know what's going on in both camps. If you're a cricketer, you are unlikely to know what's going on in the golf scene because there's no, 96ers out playing cricket. So
that makes sense.
Ben has a good point in chat. Sandman says you shouldn't bet on any esports where your org has a team in that game. And I think that's almost like the middle ground in between the two. It's like instead of saying you can't bet on esports at all, it's like, okay, you are representing the organization, therefore you probably have insider information from that org. Therefore, do not bet on that org's games. I mean, I guess you can stretch it further or shorter depending on what your general consensus is, but I suppose you do have to sort of, at some point
like
the line has to be
drawn. With the Roosters, they're talking about and associates. Now, they haven't put names out for the associates, but those associates are obviously going to be in trouble by the law as well.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we're kind of going around in circles with this one. I think it's fairly obvious our stance on that position. And overall, the TLDR from my perspective is that it is pretty unfortunate to see these guys, obviously getting the ban, but more so to actually be betting on these games and whatever. Like, I think it kind of does hurt the scene in a little bit of a way. It's not a major blow, I don't think. Like, obviously, it's not going to kill AUCS or anything like that.
It's a few bad eggs.
Yeah, but like these were sort of some players that I thought, could potentially go somewhere at some point. And 12 months is actually quite a long time in the context of a CS career. And how much can actually happen in 12 months. So that's unfortunate.
I mean, just want to add on as well, like looking at the brighter side, I think you guys touched upon this as well, where some of these players who haven't been banned or hopefully won't be banned because they weren't part of this, entire betting fiasco, maybe they might get picked up. You see a lot of roster changes happening. They might get picked up by one of the better known teams. And I feel like individually, like in the server, I like what some of these players do, but I feel there's a lot of growing up to be done here for a lot of these guys as a person, as a player outside of the game as well. And maybe, hopefully, some of these guys potentially being given a good offer by, I don't know, maybe an Order, maybe an Avant, maybe even a Chiefs, could do good for them. They could really grow as a player outside of the server as well. And that could overall help the scene overall, right? So there could be a silver lining for this. And I feel like this is... keeping the betting thing aside, I feel like Rooster as a team, the entire thing happening over there. Again, this is based purely off the entire Twitter sphere and people, all he said, she said. But I feel like there was a lot of growing up to do in a lot of things. So maybe this is the starting point, so to speak. I'm trying to put it as mildly as possible. I really don't want to get into it.
There's definitely no love lost for some of them. But I think some of them they appeared to be talented, and it's disappointing to see that talent's been wasted.
Yeah, at the same time, though, like 12 months ban for some of these younger guys is like almost whatever. It's like they can just go do school or go do uni. It's not like they're losing their livelihood or something like that, to be honest. And let's be real, even some of the other, I'm not even sure if some of the other leagues in Australia will necessarily like mirror these bans. Like, who says that they can't play, one of the other leagues or something like that in Australia? Who says they can't go play Valorant? Like, it's up to the TO to specifically mirror the ban. They're not necessarily an ESIC member or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, that is an issue, yeah.
That's one thing that interested me. It was like, we know ESL is obviously a member of ESIC. We know DreamHack and that kind of thing. So they're not going to be participating in any of the ESL or DreamHack tournaments. But like, what about LPL, right? There's LPL and there's probably a bunch of other things every now and then that they could potentially play in. Like, let's say Extremesland rolls around. Does Extremesland, you know, et cetera, these kinds of qualifiers. So definitely a greater discussion to be had. But anyway, I think the point sort of stands that, it is unfortunate, but it's definitely not career ruining. It's definitely not scene ruining or anything like that. I wonder if we'll see some of these players coming back, though. I'm not sure that we will see all of them come back. But anyway, let's move on from that. We've had a big discussion about it. It's always fun to talk about the main drama. But on to some brighter news and some happier days. We've started to get a good understanding of what NG Esports is going to be able to bring to the table now. In fact, even today, less than like half an hour ago or an hour ago, they finally announced their 5th player, which indeed ended up being Xcurate. So surprise to everyone. It was Urcast, CBBK, and Xcurate that have been announced since we last had a podcast. I think the major assumption was already made that it would be at least 2 out of 3 of those. But I just want to say that I got all 3 out of 3 correct. So would be for me. We did have a little bit of a brief discussion about it last week, but let's have a little bit more of an in-depth one here, Bleh. I mean, what's your take on this roster now that we see all 5 of the members? As well, by the way, MYM was announced as the coach. So he used to be the coach of BTRG. He's the guy from Thailand. So I don't know if that factors into any of your opinions either, but just putting it out there.
Look, it's 5-power 2.0 with no Chinese players and more variety when it comes to nationalities. Let's put it that way, all right? I'm not going to buy into this experiment. Urcast individually, fantastic. Impression, as someone who understands the game, who studies the game, I like the guy, right? Xcurate, like, the guy was carrying title calling as well as opting for titles and big events. Individually, these names are great. CBBK might be the little bit of the outlier over here. I don't think he is the most impressive player for me when you talk about Thailand as a region. And who do we have remaining? Zine, obviously, we know what this guy can do, right? Like, so individually, all these separate parts, it seems to work. But I've seen it too many times. There have been a lot of mixed teams back then. We saw the 5-power lineup, like I mentioned. We saw a couple of other experiments coming out as well. Hopefully, with Impression at the helm, you want it to work out. But then you saw what happened at BTRG. Yes, I agree. They had a lot of payment issues and org issues and whatnot. But that was towards the latter, the ending stages of their journey with that org. But I still didn't see anything happening earlier on. They weren't really achieving anything else. So, you know what? I'm just going to wait and see what's going to happen. They have to first prove that this experiment can work. And right now, I am going to put them at 0. I'm going to start them off at 0. They're below everyone else. Let them win some shit. And then we'll talk about... No, listen, how many teams are going to fucking hype up and they're just going to shit
You're
the
so
bed?
jaded.
And then I have to come on this fucking podcast again and be like, yeah, guys, maybe I might have overhyped them a little bit. I'm tired of that. So right now, they're nobodies. Let them do something, and then let's talk about it.
Okay, Ian, what side of the fence are you going to sit on here? Are you going to be on the hype train with myself and maybe Pilsky? I don't know, but he's normally someone that gets excited about things. Or are you going to join Bleh on the dark side?
I don't know, man. I'm usually a pretty straight shooter. And I love Urcast, right? But I did see him as the weak link when he was in Greyhound. But nonetheless, I was still sad to see him leave Australia. And I was happy for him when he moved over to Tiger. And since then, I think he's obviously continued to do very well. So I think he is a good utility player. I just can't believe Bleh is just dead. He's just dead for Asian CS. Like, he's just given up on the region.
He casts like 1 or 2 EU fucking dream hacks and he's like, oh, I'm done. I'm out of here. Asian CS be damned.
It kind of is, though, right? And I think we all need to be very real. We all need to be very real that this region is just falling further and further and further behind. So, yeah, they've got a very tough job ahead of them. They're starting from 0. They literally have a 0, strat book. So there's a lot of maps to get depth in. So it's going to be very difficult for them. Don't expect results overnight. They're not going to be challenging Tyloo, Vici, Renegades. It's just not going to happen overnight. Watch this space. Hopefully they can all stay mentally strong because there's going to be some crushing defeats for some really good players who probably aren't used to it. And I don't think they'll ever have an opportunity to really go anywhere. That's my opinion. I think Blair is right. They're just not going to have the opportunity to grow and succeed, unfortunately. As much as it's a great lineup, and I'm sure they're all great guys, well, I know most of them are great guys, it's just a very difficult place to be in is APAC. to succeed. We don't get a whole lot of opportunities. COVID's obviously destroyed us. They're going to have to really pull something out of the bag. And I would love to see it. With Zion as well, I think I'd love to see them play European teams, NA teams, Australian teams more often. We've always said that. We've always wanted that. But the fact of reality is it's just not going to happen.
All right, Pilsy. Lucky last. You have to come in here with something nice to say, surely.
I have a lot of nice things to say, and I have a couple of concerns as well. Look, it's a pretty decent lineup. And I think the most exciting part of this lineup is that if you're ever going to see a team play proper CS, this is the team that's going to play proper CS. Like, you've got so many brains in this team, so many people who have dabbled around calling or secondary in-game leading, like Xcurate, CBBK. Just talk about CBBK for a second. Like, he was basically like the man at the helm of like the best Thai team that was actually like a team that tried to play nuke and tried to run proper strats and tried to actually play proper CS a little bit. So he's another guy who's got like a fair bit of experience in terms of like trying to make a team structured. Impression, Xcurate, Urcast, and then you got Zion as well. I mean, I'm not sure if he's dabbled in any calling, but he's definitely a little bit more on the cerebral end of the players. The issue that I have is I feel like this lineup is actually like a little bit of a case of too many cooks of the kitchen and too many of the same kind of player. Like, too many players who are a little bit more on the supportive end of the rifling spectrum. Too many players who are not high fragging players. Too many players who want to instinctively pull flashes out and try to support their teammates in, which means that there's going to be role conflict and there's going to be... You need somebody to embrace that role of just getting his dick out and getting in there, especially in Asia. Like, you cannot be that team who is fucking sitting there with util out.
Yeah. You've got that gatekeeper of Vici and Tai Lu, who literally just 5 players have their dick out constantly. Like, you can't build a strat book around guys who do that and then go to Europe and have a different strat book. It's very difficult. It's like you've got 2 enemies and you can't prepare for them both at once. So they're going to prepare to beat Tai Lu and Vici, and they don't have the star players to do that. So their strategy is going to have to be so good. It's going to have to be flawless. Because we've even seen Australian teams go over there who admittedly aren't as sharp as the Chinese, and they just get decimated and think the Chinese team are cheating because they're doing such dumb shit, but they're just killing them. And so that's the challenge, I think, for this team as well.
Well, I got to say, I'm not going to hold my breath, but I want to, like, I want this to be exactly what we wanted from BTRG. Right?
Yeah, we all want it, dude. It's just, you got to be realistic. Like, even the players they picked, right? Like, I would have loved to see someone like, let's say, a Derek join in. Someone who doesn't have to think. Someone who's just going to go in, pop heads, right? And I have to agree with Pilsky. The roles individually, like, the pieces look really good. These are players I would love to have in different lineups we've seen over the past in Southeast or like Asia in general. It's just that I really hope it works, man. I know I sound very negative, like a negative Nancy right now. I really hope it works, but I don't know. It seems a little like a couple of things seem off about this team.
You've got Zion as a star. You've got Xcrit as a SnypeR star. Then you've got, in my opinion, 3 utility players. So yeah. Who else is going to step up there? Is someone going to become a star overnight? Urcast is not a super aggressive player. I don't think it's in his wheelhouse. Is that something that Impressions is able to do? And I wouldn't expect CVBK to do it as the in-game leader unless he's going to be that selfless guy who goes in first.
I think Impression's going to be in-game leading, and then CBBK, I mean, he's like a solid rifler while he was doing the in-game leading, so maybe he's got like a little bit more to give, but I don't know. I don't think that they have firepower heavy lineup to be able to contest with like a Tai Lu or something like that. That's where they need to like embrace the tactics and embrace being able to like play some more proper CS. But at that same time, it's like the thing I always think about is it's like, you've got some fucking like, I don't know, math wizard, and then he's just going to go up against caveman Tai Lu, who's just going to bash his head in with a club, and it's going to be like, yeah, thanks for coming.
I mean, that's something Vici keeps trying, right? Like they do have that. They do punish Tyler quite often, but then again, you can't forget they have fucking Jam Young. You have Kaze, like proper superstar players in the region, and on top of that, Zoking just might pop off and have one of those games where it's just unplayable. None of the players on this lineup for NG seem to be of the caliber of even Zoking and Almond when they have a really good day. You know what I mean? And that's what worries me. That's always going to be a problem.
I think I remember watching something about that in one of your previous podcasts where you were just saying like, hope they get one of these great stars into this lineup so that you can just say, we've got the utility, we've got the leadership, and we've got the star, the firepower. And this team is like a weak Cloud9 of Asia coming together to battle it out against all the other Asian teams that are literally just really good at deathmatch.
Not only that, they have that sort of cloud hanging over their heads now where everyone's like, this is the Asian phase, this is the new Asian super team, I suppose. And I guess that maybe is something that could potentially come back to bite them as well.
Listen,
because
I'm not guilty this time around, all right?
No,
I'm not guilty this time around. I'm not
Yeah,
calling it. It's everyone else. It's everyone else.
What I will say is I think it is fairly reliant on Xcurate getting back to old form and, you know, being like one of the top AWPers in Asia again, which if you listen to Impression, he would tell you he still was within BTRG, but at least from my perspective, looking at it from the outside, he had dropped off quite a lot. Either way, we'll move on from NG Esports because we've got a lot to talk about today and we're already running over time. So let's move into this next one. Maybe this will be a quick one. I don't know if you guys saw, but VOX has done a little bit of a tease on their Twitter, VOX Eminor. So the OG Australian Counter-Strike team, obviously Ian will be very familiar with. And they just tweeted something like, does this thing still work? So I'll give this one to you, Ian. Do you think that is anything or do you think that's someone just having a Mickey? With the Twitter
it's
account.
just dog shit, man. Like whoever owns that account has nothing to do with the original Vox. It was sold off a long time ago, so take it with a grain of salt.
Okay, you know it's perfect timing for them to do that though, because like the 100 Thieves roster is sort of breaking apart a little bit, so maybe stir up a little bit of excitement, do something like that.
Yeah.
Who knows what could happen?
I don't know what's in it for them. Obviously, they get hard on, but there's nothing coming out of it. Like they're not going to get money or anything, and no one's going to reunion in that team.
Yep. I heard like an idea that it might be like someone has gone and bought VOX Eminor as the brand, and they're going to try and do an MIBR kind of thing. Like I think that could be kind of cool. Like imagine Renegades would buy VOX Eminor. Although what I will say in that respect is that I actually think Renegades as a brand name, as far as Australian Counter-Strike is concerned, now has more of a pedigree than VOX Eminor did.
I believe that. I think Renegades has come a long way to being an Aussie org, so to speak, and a fan favorite. I think VOX Eminor is just a nostalgia hit, unless it's somebody from the original team. I'm talking Boonza-esque. I wouldn't put any stock in that. And even if they did come back, they just tarnished the name. I remember when they had that team after we left. After I was in Immunity and after the VOX team left for Renegades. It was sold to Pandan, I believe, who was part of MSI. And then they tried to keep it going, and it was just this second-rate team of up-and-comers, no doubt. Like, they had a chance, but it was just kind of ruined the nostalgia of it, right?
Yeah.
I think you just got to let good things die. We did it with F-Zero, and I think it's on the, to be in that same level of consideration as F-Zero, I think it's good to leave VOX Eminor in the past.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't think it's a bad idea, like whoever owns the account right now, to make this tweet out. I think from a marketing or like future idea perspective, I guess relevant. It kind of makes sense. Yeah, just stay relevant, just in case, you do have an opportunity to get bought out. Like, it makes sense. So I don't really blame whoever owns it for making the tweet. It was a perfect time to do it, honestly.
All right. Well, it seems like nothing's going to come from it, but we'll keep an eye on it and see what happens. If anything does happen, we'll talk about it in future. Let's talk about one thing that we knew wasn't ever going to happen and has now been postponed, was Funspark Ulti 2020. I know we've talked about this a lot, so I'm not going to touch on it too long, but I know since we've been talking about it, just wanted to update everyone that has been postponed until 2021, with January 30th to February 8th being the new dates. To be honest, I still can't see it happening at that point in time, so we'll just leave it at that and move on to some of the really interesting discussion. We had a lot of viewer questions this week, and so pretty much half this episode, probably even more than half this episode, is going to be viewer questions. And to dive into the first one, now this is going to be a wall of text. You're going to have to listen to me talking quite a lot, but I'll give you a TLDR at the end so that we can reiterate the question once we've all forgotten it. This is from iMarbot, who is one of my Patreons, so shout outs to him. And appreciate this question. It's quite an interesting one. He says, in regards to match fixing that was talked about towards the end of last week, Bleh brought up online cups and their coverage on HLTV and Liquipedia. My question is, how far do you think the responsibility should go in regards to things such as that? For example, betting sites like GGBet, which sponsor or have sponsored in the past large tier 1 events by ESL and DreamHack, will add basically like different odds and stuff like that to the games that are specifically on Liquipedia and HLTV. He says they already limit events and matches that they cover, excluding anything that's considered quote-unquote amateur level tournaments or anything that we consider to be fake or suspecting of involving match fixing, particularly around the Asian and the Chinese region. And they also exclude matches from ever featuring on the front page of the website on the match ticker, those specific matches, for example, based on certain criteria as well. So the basic TLDR here is he's basically asking, where does the responsibility lie as far as who should be actually dictating what goes onto these websites, or who should actually be kind of policing the betting? Should they take a stronger stance on the Asian region, and should betting sites be the ones to check every match or tournament rather than it really falling back onto HLTV and Liquipedia? So I guess to sum up the question, whose responsibility is it to police betting, and should HLTV/Liquipedia be the ones to actually not cover games because they suspect that there's some betting and match fixing, etc., going on?
I think it's both. I think everyone involved in making this industry run, everyone owes it to everyone else to make this work, right? So the betting sites, 100%, they need to be more in depth when it comes to these sort of things. There's so many patterns, so many weird betting scenarios happening, so many, like I said, the Asian region as such, so many games being thrown. And even in the Dota 2 scene, I know I'm diverging a little bit here. I saw a post from Liquipedia for Dota 2 where the admins and some of the people involved in Liquipedia for Dota 2 were getting threats, like actual threats from certain teams and certain TOs, especially from Asia, who's not just Asia, but generally speaking, whose tournaments are getting taken down because they're just putting up fake tournaments just for, match fixing or for betting. And I feel like it's both. Like if the betting sites start taking things a little bit seriously, it makes it so much easier for the likes of HLTV and Liquipedia to kind of, filter out some of these tournaments. And it has to be hand in hand. And I know HLTV does what they do. There was kind of like a blanket thing happening here, and with this entire match fixing shit which happened with the players from Rooster, it's only going to hurt the scene. So I'm caught in two worlds, right? I want them to be stringent and strict with having some of these tournaments from some of the lesser known regions being put on HLTV or Wikipedia. At the same time, I feel bad for that up and coming TO, some plucky guys like, what, I'm going to make something happen. And that's a beautiful thing about Counter-Strike and games like this, which don't have the publisher control, where you can be a nobody and you can, as a team, as a player, as a talent, as a TO, you can still put your name out there. And this hurts them so badly. And that sucks for them, right? And I think it has to be the betting companies, but then again, like, who are they really answerable to, right? It's such a murky place to be in. So yeah, that's my answer. Like, it has to be everyone involved here: HLTV, Liquipedia, the TOs, and, well, most importantly, these betting companies.
My stance here is that, like, I actually don't think it should be on HLTV or Liquipedia not to cover them. Like, at the end of the day, they are like the end of the pipeline in a way. So if no one else is doing it and the shit's still getting through, they're going to have to put the wall up. But it shouldn't actually be their responsibility. Like, as far as they're concerned, they are just a news aggregate, and that's all they need to be. They just need to put the game on. If there's shit happening, that's not their problem. That's not their fault. It's nothing to do with them. So I think realistically, HLTV and Liquipedia should ideally be covering everything. That's the point. That's why they exist as a concept. They should just cover everything. But they can't, because it's, having implications further on down the track. So realistically, I think you go back and you look at the betting companies and you look at all that shit, and that's, to me, it has to come back down to the betting companies.
Well, at the end of the day, you got to put it into simple terms. Who's making the money? The betting companies are making the money. The betting companies have the money to invest in making sure that they keep their money. It's their job. I think I heard the other day that New Zealand has some deal with betting companies where all the money some of the money that comes into esports betting goes back into esports communities, and stuff like that. And I mean, Jordan, you see with Bankstown Sports Club, etc., the money that goes into those has to go back into the sports club. So I think if you're going to make money off esports, the money has to go back into esports. Now, whether that be just making sure that there's integrity, whether it is anything else from a grassroots or community point of view, whatever, that's the gambling company. It's their job to worry about whether or not the gambling has integrity, right? They should be shutting down matches from their betting website and saying, yep, that we've had some unusual betting activity on that. We're shutting it down. And in that case, I think it should be important that HLTV updates and says matching was suspended on this, betting was suspended on this match because of some scrupulous activity with the gambling, and we've seen a $20,000 bet for the loser or the underdog or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I think it is mostly on the betting companies. However, I think there's a general responsibility on everyone in esports to make sure that this doesn't happen, and that's dobbing a deal a day, dobbing a match fixer. But I also think, like you said, Jordan, when it gets down to it, if no one else is going to do it, then it has to be HLTV. And then what Bleh says is you're locking out Joe Bloggs from creating his own at-home tournament, and that is a very important thing. And that is the beauty of esports, is that anyone can get involved and start running tournaments. You look at the people who run tournaments today, they all started from nowhere. They all started off HLTV.org. And we've seen the impact that we've had when HLTV stops reporting on Australian matches and stops reporting on Chinese matches. You're literally deleting history, right? You're not recording history. So I think that's a very bad thing, and we don't want to go down that path.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because that was what I was going to bring up here for you, Pilsy, as well. It's like, how much of an impact do you think HLTV not covering the region has actually had? Because I know, like, if we go back in the day, like 5 years before the majority of Australian games were even on HLTV, you know, like when it was just Gomez that was like putting games up every now and then for like a LAN final or something like that, the viewership boost, the viewership boost would have actually been like 2,000 to 3,000 viewers, which at the time, like now it doesn't sound like much, but at the time when we were getting like maybe 500 viewers, maybe more like 200 to 300, it was like 10 times what you would get if you had it on HLTV. So I don't think it's going to be quite as much anymore like these days, but even still, not having these games on HLTV, as you've said, Ian, it removes history. But not only that, I think it really just makes people like care less almost about the region, because they're not exposed to it at all.
So you're asking me what impact it has for HLTV to not cover it, or?
Yeah.
You don't have to say something, Pili.
Well, I don't think I have anything to say, to be honest. I think these guys cover it. I think the only thing that I wanted to say is just the fact that it's something that's on my mind a lot, to be honest. Like working in esports, is just sources of money, and whether that's from betting companies or whether that's from potential sponsors. Like I really do wonder where a lot of the money comes from, and where a lot of this investment comes from. And to be honest, I might be a bit of a snowflake or something like that, but I don't necessarily think I want to be, spending the next decade in an industry where the money doesn't come from scrupulous, sources and things like that, But I don't have my head around, I don't have a good enough field of view, so to speak, to know whether that's the case or not. I would suspect it is, but you never know.
I mean, certainly when I can't speak for Australia, because as far as I'm aware, I haven't seen anything in Australia where I've thought that money hasn't come from a legitimate source. But certainly I've had job offers from around the world that you just know you're either not going to get paid, or that it's just unreal money, and that it doesn't sound trustworthy. Like for example, there was one that came from Bulgaria, and later on we found out that they just didn't pay anyone. And you're right, Pili, there is a lot of that in the industry. And particularly when you look at places like Russia and whatnot, who knows? Who really knows who's funding these teams and where their money comes from? So that, I think integrity has always been a really tough part for Counter-Strike and esports, because someone has to have the money to get it off the ground and not expect return. Like Jordan and I were talking about before the cast, like where does the money in esports come from? Because there's no monetization in winning matches, So yeah, you've got a good point, and if you're a little bit worried about your esports career and getting money from legitimate sources, I think you're pretty safe in Australia, and these big organisations like what you'd be looking at, ESL or DreamHack or Flashpoint or something like that. So I think you're pretty safe there, mate.
For now. We obviously we want to expand our shores in. We don't want to be stuck in Australia. That's the whole point of Geographically Challenged.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying, like, don't be afraid of those ones. But yeah, obviously, when it, like we were saying, these ones that just pop up out of nowhere with money, you just got to be a little bit smart.
And who's funding the esports CEO salary? Like, that's all I want to know, to be honest.
Who is the esports CEO?
Well, I've spoken to the esports CEO, and I've met with a lot of CEOs that are involved with esports myself. So I think we're doing really well. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
In case if that went over anyone's head, there was like some tweet that came out this week in Australia where I think it was something to do with some government office where they were asking some guy about, what the integrity is to do with like esports betting and blah, blah, blah. And he's basically said like, oh, I've had chats with the former CEO of esports or something like that. And we're all just going like, who? So I don't know. There's someone out there masquerading as the CEO of esports to the Australian government. Anyways, bit of an aside. But let's jump into some more of the viewer questions. And this one is from Murazrai. We always love Murazrai. He always continues to pop up. And his question this week is, can ESL or DreamHack bar African Counter-Strike teams from signing up for the Asia qualifier? So, Bleh, this is one that you love to talk about. So let's give this one to you.
I like how Murazrai is so... look, you can't bar them from playing if they're allowed to play by the same CEO, right? Like, imagine ESL going, all right, the Asian qualifier is open for Africa as well, which they did, which I don't think is a smart idea, but they did for the recent minors, which unfortunately, it's not happening. But you can't be like, yeah, you can sign up, but you can't. You can't do that. It doesn't make any sense. I do agree that I feel like Africa should have its own qualifier, that it shouldn't necessarily be part of the Asian region, unless if we have the Asian minor. Okay, here's my thing, right? If we have an Asian minor, we can call it like the Asian/African minor, call it that way. And I'm okay with it because Asia is the weakest region. Africa is also equally weak, if you ask me. Have an African-only online qualifier, right? Even there, it won't be really fair because the southern part of Africa and the northern part, again, it's a big continent, right? So have a southern qualifier for South Africa. I think that's the strongest region. And when we talk about North Africa, you're talking about the Algerian area that these guys can't play with the Middle East, if I'm not mistaken. So they have their own region over there. So yeah, you got a team from the southern part of Africa. You have a team from the Middle East and northern part of Africa. Boom, you go for the minors on land and you play it out. I think that's a fair solution, right? Although right now with the COVID thing, there is no solution. But you can't ban them from a qualifier which they're allowed to sign up on, Murazrai.
Well, I want to say, I think the TLDR is like, theoretically, yes, they can ban them.
Yeah.
The real question is, should they?
No, they should. Come on.
Yeah. So, like, ESL or DreamHack, let's be real. They can do whatever the fuck they want, end of the day.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, public perception and whatever may be a thing, but it's their tournament. They can do whatever they want. I don't think it would be a great idea, obviously, for the region or for anyone involved. But if the question is, can they do it? Then absolutely, yes, they can. Yeah, if they want.
Don't do it, guys. It's not fair.
Just don't do it.
Yeah.
No, look, I remember back in the day, this used to be a huge thing because we used to have a lot of Asian students that came to Australia and absolutely decimated us and pretty much made us as good as we are today. And then, they started winning our national tournaments, and then someone had to put something in place that, like a nationality check. So I think unless the tournament has very clearly stipulated a nationality check, which we still see today, I don't think it's fair to exclude people. I know there's been instances where Australian teams have been excluded even just from Asian qualifiers, which I think is horrendous. And the ping isn't too bad from West Australia in particular, where it's like 50 to 60, and to be excluded is very upsetting. And these could be like Asian qualifiers for DreamHack, something like that, something so major as that. So I think if the opportunity is there for people to play, if it's within a reason, which I think we need to clarify, if it's like maybe 200 MS maximum, then I think they should be allowed to play. Now I don't know what sort of ping we get from Africa, but they're definitely, the whole point of this game was it was called Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and it was meant to take over the world, and it can't do that if people are excluding people.
Yeah, I mean, on the topic of nationality, I think it's hard to say, you can't play because you're this nationality. I think it should be more of a geographical thing. It's like, where do you live? Like, if you live in this area, then you can compete in this qualifier. But it's not like, oh, you're an exchange student, you can't play in
Here's-
the
here's the
Australian
problem.
tournaments. Fuck you.
Here's a problem, Elfish, and whenever you bring up regional restrictions when it comes to ping, and this is something which has happened, mind you, right? When TOs do it only for the ping, people get very nationalistic, and it's the good old meme of is this happened because I am from Bulgaria, and I replace that with any other country, and that's literally what people bring. I'm like, no, it's not because you're from this country, it's because the ping doesn't work. So people will remain people, Elfish, unfortunately.
I love how relevant that meme is, even to this day.
Yeah,
Good old
It's never
spy
going to
leader.
stop being relevant. We're always going to have different countries. I mean, just on what SnypeR was talking about before, I remember getting fisted in a couple of ODCs by Storm.cn in freaking 2013. Just a bunch of Chinese dudes running at me, absolutely fucking destroying me in my own home country. And it's interesting, like I've been actually covering a little bit of StarCraft 2, and they have like ANZ champs in StarCraft 2 at the moment, and like I think there was only 3 out of 8 players were Australian and New Zealand, and the rest of them were like Pakistani, UK citizens, or like fucking like a Southeast Asian Singaporean player. It's fucking awesome. But and it's obviously it's different in StarCraft because you can play with 200 ping. Yeah, it's a pretty distinct disadvantage, but you know, I don't know. It's always an interesting topic, no matter what esport you're sort of thinking about.
Yeah.
The coolest thing about esports is anyone can do it. If you've got a good computer and even an internet connection, if you don't have an internet connection, you used to go down to your net cafe and you could just get on the same playing field as everyone else. The second you start excluding people from esports, gatekeeping them out of esports, I think that's when esports is just not the same as what it used to be.
Yeah. There's a good point from Schlee in the Twitch chat as well. Said something happened recently with the Renegades coach not being allowed on a server for DreamHack. I can't remember what exactly that was, but I do remember hearing about that. It was just weird. It was like they wouldn't let him be in the server in the coach slot because he was from Denmark instead of from Australia. I can't remember what tournament it was though. It was like a qualifier or something. Anyway.
No, I think it was one of the ones we were casting.
Was it? That seems strange though, because like hasn't he been in the server before?
Yeah, but it was like a different TO's ruling. I think it was like the difference between DreamHack and something else.
Yeah, maybe a DreamHack
something
versus an ESL
That's
ruling.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that is weird.
That is weird. It's like, I guess, I mean, I don't really see the point there anyway, but whatever. But whatever.
They
Does a
fucking won
coach-
anyway, lol.
Do we go down the rabbit hole of does a coach need to be in the server, or did you already cover that with the whole coach bug?
I mean, we can go into that if you'd like to. We didn't really do much of a coach bug discussion. We sort of touched on it in so much as
I don't want to
whether
kill
it
Lex.
happened in Asia or not, but
Very good.
you can go ham if you want, Ian. It's all yours.
Yeah.
Nah, well, I don't want to. It's just does the coach need to be in the server? I've been a coach. I don't think you bring a whole lot by being in the server anymore. I mean, if you're going to IGL, sure, 100%, but coaches should be worrying about other things, and they shouldn't be interfering with the game. I think when the game is live, they should have their moment in the timeout or whatever that they have. I think being in the server and being able to hear footsteps and everything is only an interference.
It's
But
also
that's
a good
just my
point
personal opinion.
here from MC. He says the other team won't be able to shoot the lagging coach. So I guess that's a good point there as well, in that, like, yeah, okay, you might have a nationality rule or a location rule for the players because you don't want their ping to be crazy, but it doesn't matter what the ping is for the coach. Anyways, let's move on from that whole discussion.
Well, the coach could end up playing.
Well,
right?
okay, theoretically that would be a different situation then. But if they're in the coach slot, then I think it's
Just use some common sense.
Yeah. Anyways, there's another question from Murazrai. He says, what's happening with Divine Vendetta? Apparently there's a roster change after failing to qualify for PAL Fall. I reached out to Tea Time, who's a caster from that region, and he actually worked with that team a little bit back when Road to Rio was a thing, to sort of suss out what's happening there. And he said to me that it seems like the team is going to be disbanding, although he's not associated with the team anymore. So that could be, not 100% correct, but
surprise.
yeah, seems like they're breaking up.
Dude, listen, that's a problem in the Middle Eastern scene. A lot of talented players, but they're worse than any other Asian region when it comes to sticking around. I don't know what it is. I've heard from a couple of players. I remember like speaking to, I'm not going to take any names, but some of the players from NASA. When we met them, and I've known a couple of these guys pretty well. And one common trend with the Middle Eastern region is an ego. And that's something which has been very evident, and I've noticed this, right? Like they really think they're really good, which is good. It's always good to have an ego when you're approaching Counter-Strike or any game for that matter, or in life in general. But it seems like individually, it just never seems to really click for any of these teams. So you'll always see a team showing up for an Extremes LAN or some qualifier. You're like, oh, these guys are pretty good. 3 months, boom, they're gone. So same old story once more, just a different name.
Different name. All right, fair enough. I think that answers the question. And another one from Murazrai. He says, has ESIC reached out to 5E to request demos for the coaching bug investigation? So I did a little bit of sleuthing here again, and I reached out to Michal and said, you know, have you got any info on this? He's obviously, again, I want to point out, not a representative for ESIC or anything like that. He doesn't speak for them officially. But he did say ESIC hasn't reached out to 5E. And he's under the assumption, actually, that it was more so on the TOs to reach out to ESIC rather than on ESIC to reach out to the TOs. So,
good luck with that.
Obviously, if 5E wants to check, then they can reach out to ESIC. I assume that they'll go through the VODs, the demos rather, regardless of who's sending them. But basically, from what it seems like, no, none of the 5E VODs have been... I should say demos again. None of the 5E demos have been checked. Although, you know, you look at it and you're like, okay, well, if there is anything, there's ESL demos, there's DreamHack demos, of which I know have been checked. And most of the top teams, the ones that are kind of relevant, are actually playing in those tournaments anyway. So,
you mean of Asian teams?
Of Asian teams, I should say, yeah. I mean, theoretically, something could slip through the cracks. But if it is slipping through the cracks, they're not getting anything out of it anyway because they're fucking not qualifying for any of the top tournaments.
Yeah. So, it's shit to think like that, but like that's the reality of it.
Well, I mean, you're not going to catch everything. You can't look at everything, so you have to take a sample size. It's like when you take a survey of like the Australian population. You're not going to survey 20 million people. You're going to survey 1,000 people, extrapolate that over 20 million responses, and say this is 75% of Australian population thinks this. That's the kind of thing I think that we're sort of talking about.
And that's good of Michal to get back to you as well, because that guy doesn't work for 5E. He doesn't work for Valve. He's just doing the right thing and helping out ESIC. So I wouldn't expect him to be reaching out to 5E to say, hey, give me your demos. And, you know, who knows if they would anyway.
No, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, do they even give a shit? Probably not. Like, obviously what we know about Asian Counter-Strike and Chinese Counter-Strike in particular, it's like sometimes sweep it under the rug, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. And so that's what I would suggest would be happening.
I was pretty amazed at that number of 80%.
What was the 80%?
The 80% of match fixing was from China.
China. China and Russia,
China and Russia. China and Russia. It's not just from China,
Well, I mean,
not surprised.
Look,
that's a lot.
I don't really know where I sit on that one, but anyway, it is a lot. You're right. So, yeah, I guess that answers the question. No, they haven't reached out to 5E.
There'd have to be evidence to say that as well.
True. I mean, I suggest from that HLTV confirmed podcast that I watched that one. Was his name Ian from ESIC? I think.
Yeah, Ian Smith,
top bloke
Ian
actually.
Smith, yeah, from ESIC.
All the good ones are called Ian.
He seemed pretty legit. You know, like I got good vibes from that. Having never spoken to the guy myself.
Being in esports, you get a pretty good feel for people who are legit and who are
just like shit
full of shit.
Yeah. Anyway, shout out to Michal as well, talking about guys that are legit. He even said he watches the podcast sometimes, so maybe he's going to see this. Either way, we'll move on to the next discussion. This one actually I think is a pretty interesting kind of a concept and something that I discussed on a show that I did earlier on with Pronogo earlier on in this week. And the question is, will Flashpoint or Blast expand to Asia and Oceania? Again, this one's from Murazrai. It's his last question for this week. So what do you guys sit on this one? I'll let you guys take the floor before I give you my 2 cents.
I think Bleh should go first, just so that we don't have to say anything.
All right, fine, cool. I'll do it, as usual. I don't think Flashpoint's going to come anytime soon, mainly because it's more about like it's more about partner teams, right? Partner organizations and whatnot. And if you look at Australia, like I think Australia is the only region where I have to look for a partner team, apart from maybe Tyloo, maybe Avicii, but even then, I don't know. Not anytime soon, especially with the COVID thing happening right now, and you know how much of travel is going to be a problem for them. And you can't even have online games, or you're going to have Tyloo play Furia, for example. It's not going to be happening. So not anytime soon. I would love for Blast to expand out as well, but then again, let's be real, right? Like these two companies, they're taking on ESL. They're taking on ESL DreamHack thing happening over there, and for them, it's about trying to get the most number of eyeballs, trying to get the most amount of like monetization possible from big name orgs who are playing over there. And as big as Tyloo might be in Asia, and as well big as Chiefs or Order might be down under, I don't think they necessarily have what it takes for what big. Blast would be looking for. They're just not big enough, unfortunately, right? Yeah. And I don't really blame them for it, right? It's an expensive endeavor. Like you talk about esports, it's hard to make money as it is as a TO. And I feel like what they're doing, I obviously don't know the numbers, but I feel like they're doing something right to make it sustainable, to put up a good product which satisfies the sponsors. And if they are looking to expand by, like, say, 2 or 4 slots, if I was them, I'll be real, I would look for another EU team. You know, I would look to partner another EU team, maybe another NA team, NA org, maybe try and poach some of those partner teams from ESL, perhaps. That's what I'd be aiming at. So maybe down the line in the future, yeah, if everything's great and whatnot, in a couple of years, they might be looking to expand out, but unfortunately not anytime soon.
Yeah, I just don't see it. I totally agree with you. Blair, do you know we have a Rainbow Six team in Fnatic?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So all right. So I was going to use that as an example of a good pickup from an APAC team into a well-known organization. Mm-hmm. But something like that, I don't think it's even been as successful as Fnatic would want. Like, they haven't had an error or anything like that. And that's what you really want. If you're going to go down under and pick up a team, you want a team that's going to really cement. Like, remember when they got that Australian team? So I think for something like Flashpoint, there won't be a dedicated league for Australia or for Asia. And if anything, maybe the Renegades, because they have that connection to North America, they might get picked up. That would be a great franchise slot for them.
True.
But other than that, literally nothing else. No one else will have a chance. A China visa in America, good luck. You got to remember about all that stuff as well. So, yeah, just not going to happen, unfortunately. It's pie in the sky type stuff. We had Face It for 2 years, I think, or 3 years, and I think that was I think we ruined that ourselves. So, yeah.
Anything
once bitten, twice shy.
The only thing that I think about is not them having a league down here, but in particularly the Blast, not the Blast example, the Flashpoint example, I really want them to pick up like an Australian or an Oceanic team and take it into that league, because I remember them saying things like, oh, we couldn't get all of the teams and the partners that we wanted, but we were surprised by teams like maybe a Havu or something by how well they performed. I think that if you it's obviously not good for business to take less established brands out of Asia and stuff like that. Although maybe a Tyloo or a Renegades, like some of the top brands, might be okay. But in terms of performance, maybe you would be surprised in terms of how competitive they are in the league, and how good they might perform, at least the top couple of teams. And it'd be a really good opportunity for them to actually get some experience under their belt. And having a slot for some of those global regions, I don't know, maybe there is some way you can spin that in a business sense for it to be beneficial. But in terms of having like the partners that they're looking for in terms of big orgs, it's not going to be what they want, obviously.
I mean, I guess anecdotally, like I'll say, I just didn't really watch any of Flashpoint Season 1. I tuned in a very, very little bit just to see what it was, but it didn't necessarily interest me, A, because it didn't have the top teams, B, because it was sort of still getting off the ground. It was like a half-baked product because of COVID-19 and whatever.
Yeah, I think COVID really ruined it.
If there was a domestic team from Asia or from Oceania playing in that competition, I would be much more inclined to actually watch it. Yeah. And I think that would be the same for other regions, like other minor regions, I would say.
I would too, but that's the thing. From listening to their like Flashpoint Q&As and things like that, I don't get the sense that they want to try to like be the swindler of viewers or anything like that. I get the sense that they want to take the big orgs and take like the market share, and they have like big plans rather than just being like, oh, it's okay, we'll just try and like, swindle some viewers or leverage the Asian fan base or something like that.
Yeah, let's be real, right? So a couple of things have hurt Flashpoint. COVID being one major one, but the other major one is the tournament cycle. This is not meant to be a B-grade tournament. This was meant to take people, the top teams, we're talking like Fnatic, Na'Vi, Astralis. This was meant to have those teams. They know that they can't have those teams because they're already locked into tournament cycles. So you're not going to come down and reach for an Australian team just to get rid of them in maybe in a year. I think by a year, we should see it back to being exclusive tier 1 tournament only. And that tier 1 tournament will have some of these teams that are playing in Flashpoint right now in it, because that's just what happens when you're given this opportunity. And I think Flashpoint has been slightly disappointing. It was really talked up a lot, and the banter was meant to be there, and I was hoping for something E-League-esque, and then, you know, a little bit more about the players and a bit more of a show. And I don't feel like I've got that from watching Flashpoint. It just seems like a bit more of the same. Maybe afraid to take some risks, I'm not sure. Maybe COVID as well. So I'm giving them a whole pass on this year. And I think next year, teams are going to be stupid to not want to be in Flashpoint. With people like Thorin involved, that really adds it to that next level. But there are a lot of TOs around.
Also, just to add on to that, like, even if you get, let's say, an Asian team or like an Australian team, how much of viewership are you really going to get? Let's be very real here, right? Let's get Tai Lu. How many more viewers are going to get? 2,000 more? Does it fucking really matter?
2,000. Yeah.
But if you're saying that it has to be, you know, someone winning the exchange of the tournament cycle, then someone has to lose, which means that hopefully there's spots open for at some point for someone. You know, I would love to see that to be the alternative, as opposed to, you know, just handing it out. But you never know. Handed out to someone in the already established regions, but who knows?
Well, just to loop it back to the initial question, my 2 cents here is that I don't actually think either of those TOs will come to the Asian or Oceanic region either. But for some slightly different reasons, I think it's quite difficult for them to monetize that, right? You need to be a tournament operator that is ingrained in that region, that is sort of, what's the word, I suppose, endemic to that region. So I'm talking something that a tournament operator from China or a tournament operator from Singapore or something like that, where they're actually invested in building that region up and making it a thing, would do a lot better than someone like Flashpoint or Blast, or even, as we've seen in the examples of ESL and DreamHack, tacking a tournament onto the Asia region, having it there as a thing, just to say, okay, we've got an Asia or an Oceania component. I think you do much better if you had someone like, you know, Perfect World, who built up like this whole like Asia-specific tournament operator, as opposed to a European tournament operator shoehorning themselves into the Asia region and trying to make it, you know, trying to monetize it that way. Because I think they just understand, or a local team would understand what the local fans want, what the sponsors want, how to sort of integrate all of that, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a very long-winded reply, I guess, to Murazrai's question. We went a little bit more in depth into the Flashpoint discussion as well, but I suppose that's the beauty of it. So here's another really long question for you guys. So you're gonna have to bear with me for this one. This one is from Spruce Moose, and he says, I recently listened to a Finnish interview with Alu. At one point, they were talking about ENCE, even at their peak during 2019, with Alexi B struggling against Renegades and later 100 Thieves. So presumably he means just Renegades / 100 Thieves, that team. Alu said that Renegades was the only team ENCE didn't want to play, and that they were always very difficult to play against. What was surprising is that even now, Alu wasn't really sure why that was. Only thing he said is that he felt like Renegades always knew what ENCE was doing and gave props to Kazard. Natu also said that he had flashbacks of JKS with the Creek. Did you guys follow the matchup in 2019? Why do you think the boys gave ENCE such a hard time? Now, I'm going to go out and say I don't really have any fucking idea. I didn't really watch that much of this matchup or anything like that, but I'm hoping one of you guys will have a little bit something more eloquent to throw in.
I'll take the reins for this one straight off the bat. Obviously, versing Finnish teams before and beating them in immunity, they're just not that good.
I think, I guess what he's trying to get at here is go back to the Star Ladder Berlin
I think
Major.
what he's trying to get to, Pilsky, is the fact that Finnish teams just aren't good.
Okay. We can leave
Go
it at
on.
that if you want.
If that ends up being the clickbait, I'm
I'm not going to use that.
If SnypeR could beat them, then I guess,
I decimated them, man. They were not that good. And Alu was on that team as well. So obviously, Alexi B, they've got some really good players now, and so things have come a long way. But I think Australia is one of those regions where when we get our tail up, or we think we can, we can. And Finnish teams don't have the reputation that other teams do, like Danish teams now. Like Danish teams have always been really good. You can go in thinking you're going to beat the Danish teams, but they just beat you. That's just the way it is. So Alu can't even tell you why he lost. Then there's your answer, guys. They're just not that good. Kassad is a world-class coach. We've seen him polish the turd that is Renegades and 100 Thieves, and you saw what happens when he's not at the helm. Obviously, Kassad played a very big part, but we've just got this. Whatever their style is, how about this? I can't tell you what's so wrong with their style, but there's just something wrong, and we can beat it. It's very either very structured or it's just not. They just can't think quick enough. I don't know how to put it, but like when we versed them, we just made sure that we were quick. We knew exactly what they were doing from all the demos, and there were no surprises. No one had their dick out, so to speak. I think nowadays things will probably be a bit different since they have the stars, but Australia has just always been really good against certain regions, and that's obviously because of the way they play.
Well, I think that's a good way to answer the question. And then on to another one. And this is probably my favorite question we've got this week, actually. It's from Ayriks. And he wants to know Australian Winterfox versus Avant/Order. So there's a few things that you have to sort of clarify here. It's like, is it current day individuals on the Australian Winterfox, or is it the Australian Winterfox as they were back then? Because I think, you look at someone
They're
like
all
Dexter.
in the same team.
Yeah, but you look at someone like Dexter, for example, and he is like 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times the player he was when he played on Winterfox. So that's an important clarification to make. And the same for Avant and Order. It's like, are we setting them back in time, or is Winterfox coming forward in time? So I want to say, like, I think we get the current, like the players that played on Australian Winterfox, we get their current form, the current performance that they are actually outputting, put them into this Australian Winterfox roster and see how they go against Avant Order. What do you reckon?
Honestly, does anyone know what the fuck Jordan just said? Basically,
okay, well, you go ahead and do whatever you reckon. That's fine.
I get what he's trying to say. He's trying to say, like, the Winterfox, same old lineup, but current form, right?
Like, the individuals are the same, like, as they perform right now, but they're not. Like, obviously, they haven't left Avant, they haven't left Order, etc.
I don't remember the lineup of the old Winterfox.
Okay, so
it was like Dexter, APOC, EMAG, Ofnu, Zusi. And then Raz replaced Dexter at one point.
Themselves.
Later on, yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, Order hasn't got any of those players, right? So maybe that's just a good one to say.
I didn't really think that roster was very good, to be fair. Like, okay, they were over in NA, right? And I remember watching their games, and they were like playing the ESEA league at that time, like the best of ones and things like that. And it was like, when they were playing okay, they were like winning games like 16-13 over some really average NA MDL teams. And it's like, I don't really think that they were actually that good of a team, to be honest. So
it was this dog shit team that grew up out of nowhere when Immunity died. That later stage Immunity that had Dexter in it, right? And then they made this Winterfox team and went overseas straight away with no caliber, no history. They went full NG mode and just thought, we'll be able to beat NA teams. So yeah, that team actually became better. The whole point of that team, I think, was just to get experience in North America, and they were meant to be like a mates team with Renegades at the time, but I think both teams ended up not scrimming each other and all this bullshit. So I know for a fact that EMAG came back a better player. Dexter came back a way better player. Ofnu and APOC, they've always just swallowed their experience and shit it out the next day. So, and obviously the others all quit CS. So that Winterfox team with Dexter at the helm did everything that they could do. They obviously, if they were all playing in the same team right now, they would beat Avant because 2 of them are APOC and Ofnu. And, well, you know what I think about that. So Order, on the other hand, there's obviously something wrong with Order, but I think Order would beat Winterfox.
It's an interesting take. I actually want to go and say I think that the Winterfox roster, if we get the individuals as they are today, would probably beat Order. But it's such a hard question to answer.
Even play. Not consistent.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Like, you got a couple of players. I think I'm looking too much towards the players that have improved from that point, because like if you put then Winterfox against now Order, it's no competition. Order just fucks them, like just shits
100%.
on them. But like, if you make that Winterfox roster again today and have them actually practicing and training, and obviously there's personality clashes, etc. aside, I think they could actually be a pretty good run for some of these top 4 teams.
So there was always a limit to some of those players, right? Zusi obviously hit his limit in Chiefs and never really went very, very far after that. EMAG hit his limit, I think, in Winterfox itself. I think when he came back and played for Order, I don't think he really shone. And the thing is like, he was like a star player in Immunity, and he had the in-game lead for Order. It's like, what? That's a different player. You know what I mean? Raz just disappeared and all that stuff. So I just think it's a no-brainer. This current Order iteration would smash them. Obviously, that you've got Dexter, who's a star. But you've got APOC and Offner. When you say the two together, obviously, accidentally.
Freudian slip there, Ian.
Yeah, Freudian slip. They've plateaued and not really done anything with any of their experience, years and years of experience. I just don't think it's... I think they're just playing for the sake of playing now.
Here's a bit of an aside then. If we were to send Renegades over in a situation similar to Winterfox, if they were to go and play a season of NA Pro League, how do we see them going? Like current day Renegades?
I think they would go well, and they would go much better than Winterfox. But that's the thing. That was the thing. Everyone was saying when Winterfox went over, like they were like, "Oh, they're going to do like better than the average NA teams in Pro League," and they really didn't. Like it was so disappointing. Like I'm looking at the season now of the league ladder. Like there's 14 teams. Winterfox, the only teams that they outperformed was E United, Splice, Selfless, and the old like iteration of Complexity, and that's it.
Just kind of
and the like CLG, Echo Fox, Liquid, NRG, like so many teams way outperformed them, and they're like average NA lineups.
I feel Renegades are more tested as a team internationally as well, right? Like if you go back to, was it Anaheim they played, or was it Leipzig? DreamHack Open earlier this year.
Who can keep up these days?
Leipzig. But one of those events, right? It had like 3 of those Danish teams and whatnot. They reached the finals, man, against Big, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So they were playing very well today. I think that itself, and also based off some of the results they had prior to the COVID thing, I'd say looking at NA right now, I'd say I'd put them. I'd put my money on them potentially being a top 4. I won't lie. Like you have EG, you have Liquid. You have Furia. I'm throwing in Furia as well, even though they're not North American, right?
Yeah,
you have Chaos. Who else? New England Whalers. They have a couple of options
Gen
here
G
and there.
will build their roster again as well.
That's all online
Genji's
CS, right? But you've got Gen G.
But even online, I feel like Renegades would still be consistently a top 4 in NA right now.
Triumph
I'd give them
there
that
as well.
much.
I feel like they sit right where the old Renegades sits. That's the thing. They would literally sit in the exact same spot in NA, I reckon.
Yeah, well, I think this version of Renegades is better than the old one, the one that's going out now anyway. I think if you were to put Renegades up against 100 Thieves, I think Renegades would win without them having Kassad behind them. I think that's really saying something. I think at the moment, this Renegades team is in ELO hell, and, they would obviously flourish in the opportunity of playing in the North American League, just like Furia has. They could do with a lineup upgrade, to be honest. That's my opinion. The Renegades guys aren't infallible. But I think they would sit somewhere in there, just like Pili said. I don't think they would be established top 4 teams, because we're talking about like some pretty high pedigree teams. Liquid obviously going through a shit stint because they've got Grim and not Nitro. EG obviously just having trouble with consistency in online, and Furia just being that Brazilian workhorse. So I think Renegades would go in there. There'd be a huge learning curve, and then before we could even see any of the results, their contracts would probably be up.
I mean, I think the one benefit and the key defining difference between then Winterfox and now Renegades is that now Renegades has a proven track record already as a team.
Exactly.
And they haven't fucking mental boomed in the first 6 months of being a roster. I think that was one of the major problems for that Winterfox team, is that they were not a team at all before they left Australia. They went overseas. They
lived together. Some of them living out of home.
Yeah, living in this shit situation where one group is in a good fucking house and one group's in like this shithole, apparently, as far as Dexter tells me. And then, they've gone overseas. They're playing North American teams. They're getting shit on. So that's obviously causing a rough team environment, blah, blah, blah. And as you say, Ian, first time out of home for a few of them, definitely first time living overseas for them, and they're also a lot younger than they are now and a lot more immature than they are now. So I think that's the main difference. Anyway, there we go. That's a big answer to your question, Ayriks. Hope you enjoyed that one. He's got a few more for us, though, boys. I'm going to put two of these questions together, and it's kind of because they are almost... I feel like they should be grouped anyway. So you'll see what I mean when I ask them. So the first one is, if there was an invite system for applications for ESEA still, where would Order, Avant, Rooster sit in the EU competition? Are they advanced or MDL teams? So that's one part of the question. And the other question is, would Rooster, Avant, Order survive in the EU qualification hell? 500 team open qualifiers with teams like K23, Aves, Harvu, etc. Personally think it would be a shitfest and they wouldn't win a game against CIS mixers. So they almost sort of tie in together. It's basically asking, how do you think these teams would do if they lived in EU?
Not good.
Oh man. See, I've thought about that before, to be honest, and I'm not sure. That's the thing. Like, I'm not sure that they would necessarily do like fantastically in the league system. It's a different question whether you're asking about like an ODC qualifier for something, because that's like a fuck fest. It doesn't matter if you're like Renegades. It doesn't matter if you're even a decent EU team, like a fucking Godsend or something. You might fucking lose in one of those ODC qualifiers. If you're talking about a league, shit, man. Like in a EU MTL, like I'm gonna take a look at who's in EU MTL.
They're gonna get maps. They're gonna get maps.
They'll play decently in an EU.
Basically,
MTL,
that first question is: do they deserve to be an MDL team in EU, or would they be an advanced team? I guess.
How many teams are in there?
There's
I'm
going to
look at
teams
the
actually in EU.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
I had a look as well.
So, I thought I'd let you guys answer because obviously, I don't want to ruin it all with my first-hand experience.
Mate, you're the guest here.
No,
you're the
please ruin it all. Go for it.
But yeah, they would get fisted pretty hard. Those 500 team ODCs are a fucking lottery. You're coming up against the next Zywoo and you don't even know. And you get counted hard as anything because you're an outside source, right? So, yeah, because we tried that for a French BYOC and we got smashed because we played Mirage too much. But basically, you just don't know who you're versing. I look back now, I versed like all the best players in the world when they were in B grade teams. I'm talking like Glaive, Cadian, like all these players from Denmark didn't even know who they were when they're in 3D Max or whatever, and they've just or Zaspo rather, and now they're like superstars. So, and for the French guys as well, obviously remember when France had that period of being really awesome. They had 3 awesome teams. First, all those guys in a BYOC. But that's why I think no matter who it is, you can't just put them in a 500 team ODC and expect them to get through. It's just not going to happen. Like that's why that was like the eye opener for me when I came back from overseas. I was just like, how good are the top 8 teams? They have to go through all that shit, and that's why they're top 8 teams, because they're like battle hardened from 500 game ODCs, and then. I also think, well, that's bullshit because they actually never have to play that. Once they win, they never have to play those ODCs ever again. They don't have to verse LDLC Blue when they've got a hard on for you. So it's kind of like you get your invite and then you're set, just like we saw with Virtus Pro for so long, and they just get to hang around in the pro scene even though they're not getting results because they've got that invite. If that Virtus Pro team towards the end wouldn't even win a BYOC in any region.
Well, they went into MDL themselves and struggled to like win in fucking EU MDL and then bowed out of it.
Yeah, and so I mean, people are like, you don't have very good stats when you played in the majors. Well, guess what, guys? They're actually pretty good at Counter-Strike. So fuck you.
It's a fucking major.
I mean, I'm looking at EU MDL and I'm like, dude. Hellraisers, Sprout, Saw, Secret, Force,
They're getting fisted.
Yeah, I don't think they're top 10. I don't think they're a top 10. So I'm thinking like they might be an okay MDL team. They would struggle to hold like a positive.
They can't even win convincingly in
like
Australia. This is the issue I have with Order. They win games, they get to grand finals, and then they shit their bed because they don't have that winner's attitude of I will win this game 16-0. And if I'm not winning this game 16-0, I'm working harder to get to a point where I am winning at 16-0. They've got this a W is a W bullshit. And when you come up against, a team who's good on the day, they're going to beat you because you aren't that much better than them. So put them in a cis region, they're just going to get shit on by even a pug team. So I just don't think, they've got what it takes. And same for Avant. Obviously, they're a new roster and everything, and they got a new guy on there that no one's ever heard of. So they're trying things, but you have to be at least Renegades caliber before you even consider having a chance and winning some maps in MDL over there.
Cool.
Agreed.
On to the last question of today then. And the last question is one that we get all the time, again from Ayriks here. And is Forsaken the next Bntet of Asia? So, Ian, I know we discussed this one earlier as well. And I would love to hear your thoughts on it because everyone else has given their 2 cents multiple times on this topic.
Yeah, feel bad for you guys. Look, there won't be another Bntet because there's only one Bntet. There's only one Simple. There's only one Zywu. The next guy who comes up is going to have to come up through some pretty tough ranks. And they're going to be pretty good when they do. So, and hopefully they don't get vaxxed like some of our best talent.
Or another Forsaken for that matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing with this is like to define the question. It's like, when you say Bntet, do you mean, is there going to be another player that's able to go to North America, to Europe? Sure, maybe. But Forsaken is not that yet. He may be in the future. We can't say right now. Haven't seen enough from him, to be honest. Everyone thinks he might be the next Wunderkind, but how many times we've said that about people coming through the ranks? Plenty of times. And how many times they actually are? Very, very rarely. In one case so far in Bntet, right? He is the only one that's been able to do that.
Yeah, look,
Go
go,
on.
Bleh. No, you go.
No, I just want to touch upon, like, when you talk about Bntet, you got to understand how far ahead he was of everyone. We talk about Jamyang and Kazuya right now, how they're the best 2 players in Asia right now with Bntet and NA. When Bntet was there, they were nothing. They were nobody's compared to what he could do, right? He was a god. And then he moves to NA right now. And who was it Gomez who mentioned how the other NA pros don't really look at him like this god? They're like, yeah, he's a good player, but he's nothing too crazy. When you have players out there like Ott, like fucking Stewie or Liege for that matter, or Breeze, yeah, you become just one of them, right? You're still a good player. That's Bntet. I've never seen, not even heard of any player who's close to being at his level in the past 6-7 years of CSGO in Asia. So no Bntet.
Who is carrying a team from a country that literally doesn't even have a national team, then goes on to speak 3 different languages, and then finally gets poached internationally in Asia?
Who
goes through all that shit, and it's going to be harder this time. It's going to be fucking harder this time around than that, apparently.
Ideally for a team who can't speak his own fucking language. What a madman. And dropping 1.5 rating.
He was honestly robbed of the best Counter-Strike years of his life.
100%. 100%.
If someone had just had the balls to pick him up and do the visa work way back yonder, they could have had a really good team with him in it. And I don't think, I think it's sad to see him play now, to be honest, in North America. I think he's way past his prime. And I hope he can get it back, and I hope he can get those 1.3, 1.45 ratings that we've seen him get. I mean, the closest thing Australia has probably had to a star is obviously JKS. And I don't think he ever lit up a server in Australia the way Bntet did in China. So it's going to be a long time before we see someone of that caliber again.
All right, well, that's the end of the episode. Episode 20 done and dusted. So thanks very much for watching. Let's go to the final thoughts, starting with Pilsky. We'll leave Ian for last.
Final thoughts. I mean, I don't think I really have any, to be honest. I'm just happy to be here. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me
Please
on
hire
your
me.
podcast.
Please, I want to keep working in esports. Just make sure your money's clean.
All right, Bleh.
Don't bet on games you're involved with. Number 1, don't be an idiot. Don't be an idiot. All right. Don't be a twat on Twitter and be, trying to be cheeky and cocky and calling it banter. That's not banter. That's called being a fucking asshole. And number 4, hire us, you cunts.
Okay. Well, Ian, I have a special request to ask your beard for a comment. So can we get a comment from Ian's beard, please? This is where you go in the mic.
No, I'm not doing it. What?
Oh,
Who?
come on, dude.
Is that a thing?
I'm sure you would
break
make some
everyone's
noise.
ears.
Yeah, you would make some noise. Anyway, what do you have to say for yourself? Anything you want to shout out here? Any shots you want to fire that haven't been fired yet? Because I know you've always got something left in the tank.
Look, I think if I did have any shots, I'd save them for the Not Another Podcast, which will be coming back soon, TM. So strap yourselves in for that. Obviously, I'm set up with a decent camera and a microphone now. So I look forward to doing that. Obviously, I hope all of you guys get hired. I'm in a bit of a shit state at the moment where I can't do any work. But I hope to get back out there and be on a panel with one of you guys soon.
Awesome. Great. Well, that's episode 20 done and dusted. Make sure you like, subscribe on Twitch, follow me on Twitch, follow me on Twitter, follow all these guys on Twitter, and support us on Patreon as well because we like money. Patreon.com/Elfishguy is where you can find that. And we'll see you next time.
Wasting time.